doing it to prove, it wasn't to prove to other people, but it was what he wanted to do for himself. And just briefly, a little bit of a background. I graduated from Washington Jefferson College. I'm a big brother for Big Brothers Big Sisters. I started Formulate Your Future, my speaking business, in 2014. I'm an only child, and when people ask me why do I do this, truly I love sharing messages with students. Mainly, I didn't have brothers or sisters, so I really feel like it's sharing messages with brothers and sisters that can benefit from lessons that have been learned. And I do stand-up comedy. Dale knows I'm always good to crack a joke here and there. My dad did it professionally for 6 years. But tonight's message is about continuous improvement and why it's necessary and how we can actually achieve that. And when you think about our brothers and the students going back to campus, how they can be successful in this transition and how we can help them facilitate the changes that they need to make. Before we do get started, I would like to thank all the people that make this possible. Shanda Gray, we have Dale Clark on to help us run this meeting. Each and every one of you as alumni members and staff members that go above and beyond to make this organization successful even during these challenging times. So here's where we start is our lives will change. Think about even things prior to COVID. One that really comes to mind is think of 9/11 and how 9/11 changed our world in so many ways. There's other ways that our world has been changed. My grandmother, I go over, my grandmother's 86 years old, and she still has the rotary phone that you actually dial and go through. It's downstairs. We do have a cell phone for her that she uses now, but what a difference between rotary phones into today. I like to think of Shark Tank and how it's constant improvement, constant change. So it's not a matter of if change will happen, but the question is how. And for starters, with this conversation tonight about getting back on track, I'd like to get some feedback from you as to what's gone off track, right? If we're going to talk about getting back on track, we've got to talk about what it is that has gone maybe sideways, what is it that has happened. So in the chat, if we could get some participation around maybe what is it that needs to be prepared, or what is it that we need to do to get in the right direction, or maybe there's something that we need to put more time and attention to. But let's get some conversation about what is it that has gone off track. So go ahead and in the chat box there, talk to us about what are some things that you feel like as chapters, as an organization, or if you think about as the students go back, what is it that has actually gone off track? See if we get some responses in there. And the reason that we do this, I do a coaching program in Pittsburgh with students that have had some sort of experience with local district judges, and they've had something that's gone on. It can be something from underage drinking to an anger issue. It can be any kind of thing that has happened. And the first thing we always start with in this program is what is it that has gone on? So here we go. Megan, thank you. We have personal connection between brothers. In a virtual setting, it's hard to forge those relationships and form bonds the same way that you would in person. Absolutely, Megan. It's tough to have that personal connection. We'll talk about that. Ways to make personal connections virtually. Right. So as you're thinking of these things, about chapters, about life in general, let's take a little bit of a deeper look as to what's gone on here. And there's a famous quote by Socrates that said, "The unexamined life is not worth living." And the idea here is we want to dive into what is it that we can do to make things better. And to start with, especially, I think Dale shared with me that a lot of people on tonight's call are leaders in their region and have a number of student groups that they oversee. This is a great question to ask your organizations, a great question to ask yourself. And this is a book that was recommended to me by the president of an organization in Pittsburgh that is of about 200 high school principals. And he said it's the best leadership book he's ever read. It's the one that he uses in his district. And here's the question is, what does your life look and feel like when you're operating at your ideal best? Okay, what does your life look like and feel like when you're operating at your ideal best? And this is where we're going to start to differentiate from being off track to where we want to go, right? Where do we want to go as an organization? Where do you want to go as an individual? So similar, I'm going to have a lot of this into the chat box. Talk to me about what are you doing when you're operating at your ideal best? What does your days look like, right? As an organization, how do you interact with your members? As you said, Megan, connecting with your members virtually and how do you make that personal connection? What are some things that you would be doing to create that bond or create that connection when members are out virtually? Let's see, you have CJ, recruitment, connecting with those outside of chapter through virtual events, things that have been missing. Right, and see, missing how things used to be, right? And so think about what is it like at your ideal best? And as you do this, as we go through things tonight, if you're searching for someone who can change your life, well, look into the mirror. Because the people that can change our lives, the people that can change our chapters is us. You know, we have to be leaders. We have to do things differently. We have to show people how to do things. Let's see, we have Gail said, my ideal day, I can seamlessly hop from meeting to meeting and easily reach out to a virtual community and have the ability to directly connect with individuals one-on-one or in person. That's great, Gail. And so as we start to think about that ideal best, like what does it look like? Okay, then we have to start to say, what are those changes that we have to make to get there, right? How do we get to where we can connect with people one-on-one? How do we get to be able to switch to meetings seamlessly? And the way to think of this is it's time for an update. Now, I know people that have phones, this kills me. Some of my best friends do this. My wife does this. I actually, I smile when I think of her doing this, but every time Apple comes up with an update, she does what's on the screen here. She's one of those people that she clicks later for like months. I'm not going to do the update right now. I'm going to see how it goes. And then she waits and she waits. And then eventually you go through and almost when it's forced to do the update, people will do it. But for this is not about having to wait for something or having something else tell you what to update. It's really a chance as to what do you want to create, right? As leaders, it's about creating a vision and our choices as to what do we want our chapters to look like? How do we want to support our students? So the update is up to us. What do we want to change? We can make those changes. But something that's important is not all changes are the same. I was taught this by an executive at PNC Bank that told me, people make changes and they get proud of themselves that they're doing certain things, but they're not always focused on what's most important. So when we think about change, and as I'm starting to get an idea, and I appreciate all the communication in the chat, is with our chapters and how to do things virtually, this is going to be very, very important, is to focus on what's most important and don't try to do too much. And if you have your phones out or if you're taking notes, you definitely want to write this down or take a picture of this slide. We can't do everything that we want. If we came up with a list of 10 or 20 or 30 different goals that we want to achieve individually or things we wanted to do for our chapters, it's too many things. This was research that was done by these three individuals, and it shows that what they talk about is our wildly important goals and how we truly want to set 2 or 3 goals that we're really going to focus on, because if we set more than that, we actually become less productive and we don't get things accomplished. And I've had a program that I do with student government for a number of years, and one thing I see that students do is they try to do way too much. They have big visions and they have all these different ideas, and it's really about getting them on the same page to work together towards a couple of common goals. So Gail and Erica and Patrick, as you're here tonight and you're starting to hear this and you're starting to think about how you can apply this to your chapters, to yourself, is start to think about what is a couple of things that would make a significant impact, or what would make the most impact if you were able to do this. If you were able to create a relationship virtually and make that connection strong, what is the 1 or 2 things that you could do to make that happen? Not a list of, I see people, 10 or 20 ideas. What are a few of them that you could do? Let's see. Yeah, CJ just said focus on the quality of goals versus the quantity of goals. And that's it, CJ's. Think about what are those couple of goals that would make the biggest impact or the biggest difference. And as you do this, this is a little bit more, this is really tailored to individuals, but same things can happen in organizations in some ways. These organizations can get basically off track, or they fall into the way that things always were. One interesting point, and I hesitant to say that it's a bright point because there's been so many challenges over the last 18 months, but one part of this that as we get back into our organizations and groups is that there's an opportunity to, in some ways, form good habits from the beginning. In some ways, it's a reset. It's a new game. If you play golf, it's a new 18 holes. We want to try to get away from bad habits and temptations that can be there. One that I'll share that I think is really important for, I know a lot of people with organizations, making attendance close as it can be to mandatory, and giving people incentives to be at meetings. If you're able to do meetings in person, I'll share with you one of the best things I've seen groups do is they have a meal together. That meal could be something as simple as pizza. It can be something that's a local place on campus. And I've seen organizations that they actually establish a relationship with a specific vendor. I have one that comes to mind at Domino's, and they do a meal for $4 a person, and they do it every time they have a meeting. And it's a really incredible way of getting people not only to the meeting, but getting people to have some of that camaraderie. And I know that there was some talk about how to build that personal connection, really start to build relationships, especially over meals, because people have time to sit and talk. And sometimes that's the best way to really form strong relationships. Also, when you think about getting people to meetings, get people involved, have ways to get them to participate. I've also found that getting people to buy into what the organization is doing, or getting people to sign up, if you will, for what they want to do versus telling them that they're going to be a part of something. So if you have community service, getting different ways to be involved in the community, and then getting the buy-in of those students to actually sign up for those individual tasks or those days is a really great way of getting participation. And when you do that, you get them to participate in the meetings, get them to be there. Um, it builds that relationship, and it definitely gets their attendance. So with these bad habits, I do have another short message from Denzel Washington. And just to share this with athletes, and I have an actor here, um, just know that I'm not saying that we should always look up to athletes or always look up to Hollywood actors or actresses. The people truly to look up to are the people on this call. You think of people like Dale Clark and other leaders in our organization, your parents, the community leaders. There's a lot of leadership right around you.
Fail big. Today's the beginning of the rest of your life, so do what you feel passionate about. Take chances. Don't be afraid to fail. There's an old IQ test with 9 dots, and you had to draw 5 lines with a pencil within these 9 dots without lifting the pencil. The only way to do it was to go outside the box. Don't be afraid to think outside the box. Don't be afraid to fail big, to dream big. But remember, dreams without goals are just dreams, and they ultimately fuel disappointment. So have dreams, but have goals. And understand that to achieve these goals, you must apply discipline and consistency. You have to work at it every day. You have to plan every day. Hard work works.
When I started my career in financial services before I was a speaker, it was interesting to me that one of my mentors, Glenn Main, actually taught me how to fail and taught me the benefits of failing. And in that video, you heard Denzel Washington say, fail big. And one thing that Glenn used to say is try to fail every day. And it's such almost a backwards way of thinking when you think about getting back on track. But getting back on track is not necessarily about getting back to the way things were. Getting back on track is really about becoming the best version of ourselves, about becoming the best organization that we can become. And when you teach students, and I think especially as leaders and a lot of you that are guiding chapters, there is a lot of students today that will not take risks because of the fear of failure. And getting them to really understand that failing in certain ways, and this isn't about some major getting them out there and putting them in bad situations, but getting them to give a presentation in front of the group, getting them to think differently or to go out and do things in the community. And they learn through these failures. And I can say this is the earlier we can teach young people to be comfortable with learning and reflecting and getting in this process of becoming better through failure is a much better way of going than trying to eliminate it completely. The other part that I would ask you to take a picture of or to write down is The Wisdom of Oz, is a book on how to achieve everything through personal accountability. Because what we can't do through bad habits, and we can't allow students to do this either. And you've got to be strong, and you've got to make sure that being there for them is not always agreeing with them and helping them become better versions of themselves. And that's what this is. You can't blame other people, blame circumstances, other things, point fingers. My favorite one is it's not my job. I hear students will say that. Well, that's not my job. That's not my role. Another one is just waiting to see what happens. We want people to go out and take action. And so to do that, make sure that they're taking accountability of their actions and what it is that they're doing. So some ways to get results: write down what you want. Finding an accountability partner is crucial. Getting people on the same page. So you can't do it all yourself. Those of you that work in organizations and companies know that there's roles and people that fulfill different roles to achieve common goals. So we have to have people that are supporting us. We think back to that initial video of Derek Redmond when his father came by his side and put his arm around his son and said, "Son, we're gonna do this together." Is That's a way of building relationship, and especially with the question that came up earlier as to how do you build relationships virtually. I'll give you a really easy way to do that is to be very honest with people and let them know, let the students know that you're there for them, that you care about them, you want to see them succeed, and that you're there to support them. And you'd be amazed at how far some honest conversation goes to building that trust and to build that relationship, whether it be virtually or in person. And from tonight, really focus on what's important, those wildly important goals. You can't do everything, but you can certainly take advantage of the most important things in life. Do those really, really well, and you'll see a lot of success within yourself and within the organization. Would just like to say I'm very proud of you. Keep growing as leaders. Work to benefit yourself, your chapter, and your families. I hope that you received some valuable information tonight. I'm going to stick around and answer some questions. I will give you a bonus slide here. This is really about how to create change. As we start to go through things, I would definitely take a picture of this. You can learn more about it, but we go through essentially 5 stages of change. And as we make progress, it's so important that we have people that support us through there and really make sure that this is not something that just happens, but it's something that takes time. But if you work at it, and you have to always have people that are going to help you stay on track. So again, I hope you enjoyed tonight's session. And if there's any questions, I'm happy to stick around and answer those as best I can. Thank you for taking the time to be here tonight. Certainly thank you for all that you do for Delta Sigma Pi and all the students as we go through this.
Thank you, Brad. I picked up a couple of tips myself and reminders of things I had heard. So I appreciate that. And I know many of the others do as well. I'll leave the chat room open, as Brad said, so he can answer your questions for the next several minutes.
I'll share something. This is, I always have sticky notes or different things with me when I read so that I can actually put things in the book. And at one point, I had friends that are really into fantasy sports. So fantasy hockey is something that I had done for years with friends. And it became where I was like, gosh, it was a lot of my time was going into fantasy sports. So I actually had written right into the book a note to myself to call my best friend and tell him that, hey, I love you. I love our all of our buddies. But I go, this year, I was just starting my own business. And I literally said, I just don't have the time to do this right now. And I remember at that time, for whatever reason, I was so nervous to call him and to tell him that I wasn't going to do this because we had done it for years together. But after I did do it, I will share that your time is valuable, and where you spend your time and your energy is truly what gets accomplished. And by eliminating that distraction, that was just one thing to help myself get more focused. And I share that with students is to think about time is money. A lot of students respond well to finances, and so give them a wage per hour. And if they're playing video games, ask them to write down how much money they could have made, if they wouldn't have played a video game for a couple hours a week, and try to change their perspective on things. And if there is any questions, I'm happy to answer those. I will give you a couple really important ones. This is with organizations and individuals as well. But get the right people on your bus and get the wrong people off it. Your friends and the people in your organization is critically important to pick a high quality and high character of person to be around. And just today, I got a phone call from a good friend of mine that had been struggling in a relationship. And the short story was he decided to end the relationship. And it's a very difficult time right now, but I do think in the end, it's going to be a much better situation. And we talked about the advantages of really getting yourself surrounded by the right people. And Dale, you'll laugh at this one, but my parents, me being an only child, they were very observant of who I was hanging around. And they created what they called the Andrew list. And the Andrew list was anybody that they felt was not a good person for me to be hanging with. And Andrew was a bad character, as they would say. And I remember fighting with them for months as to why I couldn't be friends with Andrew. And I was little at the time and didn't understand as much. But as I've gotten older, I've seen that a lot of the people that were put on that list, I've been better off by avoiding them or by simply having better friends. And so in your organization and as an individual, think about those people that you surround yourself with is critically important to getting yourself to be the best that you can and get your organization to be the best that it can.